Vivian Mana, and my Portuguese name is Vivian Manhã, and I was born in Turlock, California, where I still live. And actually, I still live in the same house to which I was born. My mom and dad built the house the year I was born, which I think is a bit unusual. And they are both deceased, and so I inherited the house, and so I'm still here. My mother and father were both born in the Azores, actually in the freguesia of Lomba on the island of Flores. But interestingly, both of my grandfathers had lived in the United States. One grandfather, my mother's father, lived in Massachusetts, I believe it was Fall River, for 20 years before he was married. And then he went back to the Azores, got married, and did make several trips back and forth, but I don't know when or how many. On my dad's side, his father came out to Nevada to work as a sheep herder in the sheep fields in Nevada. And so my father and mother were both born in the Azores. Neither of my grandmothers ever came to the United States. Why, I'm not sure, but I think one wasn't interested, and the other one actually died young, so she didn't have the opportunity to come. My mom and dad were childhood sweethearts in this little village, and father wanted to immigrate. I think maybe mother wasn't as interested as he was, but she wanted to marry him, so the arrangement was that he was to come to the United States, earn some money, and when he had enough for them to get married and establish a home, then she would follow. And that is exactly what happened. Dad went to work in a mine in Nevada. Dad came, I believe, in 1908, and he was there 1 year, and of course it snows in Nevada, and from the Azores he didn't know what snow was. He didn't like the snow. He was underground in the mine, and he had always, every day he went swimming. He was a beautiful swimmer. Every day in the Azores had gone swimming. Well, working in a mine just was not for him. And he realized this, and so after a year, he decided he would leave Nevada and come to California. So he actually came to California in 1909, and he worked on a grain ranch. There was no irrigation in those years, and so this great big ranch in Montpelier, California, which is maybe 20 miles from Turlock. He lived with a family there and drove a 20-mule team and harvested the grains. Well, my father quickly learned that he hated mules. He just didn't. He said they were so stubborn and they wouldn't do what they said. So one day he was in Turlock for a festa, and he ran into an elderly man who was from Flores. And I guess my dad at this time, this would have been probably 1910 already. And at this time, he knew that he didn't want to stay on the grain fields, and he told this man, this other immigrant, the elderly man, of his unhappiness. And the man said to him, "Well, what do you think you'd like to do?" And he said, "Well, I don't know," but he said, "I did like at the mine. I didn't like going down, but I loved to help the blacksmith, and they used to let me help." So this man said, "Hey, it just happens that I've been at the blacksmith shop this morning. I've left some work for them to do. I'm going back there to pick up my work, and I'll talk to them." And the man did this, and he came back and he said, "The blacksmith says he will take you on as an apprentice." if you want to do that. Well, my dad was just delighted, and so that's finally what brought him to Turlock. And he went to work at the blacksmith shop in 1911. And it was 3 years, however, before he had saved enough money to write to my mother and say, I'm ready for you to come. So she arrived in she arrived in 1913. And so my mom and dad were actually married at St. Stanislaus Church in Modesto, California in September of 1913. So my mother came then in 1913 to be married. And at that period of time, I find it interesting that my dad had attended the first festa in Turlock, which was held on a canal bank. There was no building, no fairgrounds, nothing like that at that time in Turlock. So the festa actually was literally on the canal bank. And Mother wasn't here yet. She came that year, but the festa had already occurred when she came, and so she only got to go to the second one, which was the following year, and was still on the canal bank. Later, not much later, they actually built a capella, which still stands today and is the grounds where the festa is currently held. So my dad had started working at this blacksmith shop that was an established shop, and then he became very good friends with one of the other workers. And a couple of years later, when the owner decided that he was going to retire, he sold the shop to my father and the other man who's born in the United States. And they had the shop together until 1922, and then his partner drowned. It was on July 4th, and he had gone picnicking, and on the way home they decided that they were going to go swimming in the canal. And unfortunately, he drowned that afternoon. And so in 1922, then, my dad took over the shop, and he owned and ran the shop until he retired at the age of 65. In the meantime, my sister, and I have only one sister, no brothers, and my sister married a machinist. And so he started a small shop inside of my dad's blacksmith shop. And then when Dad retired, my brother-in-law bought the whole shop, and that shop still exists and is running and is in the estate of my sisters. Both my sister and her husband have passed on, but the shop continues and is now manufacturing hydraulic cylinders. And so it's high-power hydraulics in Turlock, California. It's very interesting to me that the immigrants coming now to Turlock don't really realize the struggle that the older immigrants had. My dad came with a bedroll. He came steerage, and he had to borrow the money for his passage. And of course, when he got here, that was the first thing that had to be repaid, was the passage. And it took him 3 years to get established. And then when Mother came, and of course, I was born 12 years after Mother had immigrated. So I really didn't see the real struggle that my sister did. My sister was 11 years older than I am, and she saw them when they had nothing. The shop was not paid for, and you didn't spend a penny that you didn't have to. You grew your quives in the backyard, and you grew your own tomatoes, and you didn't spend money at the grocery store except for the basics. You didn't buy clothes in the finer shops. Thank goodness that Turlock had a J.C. Penney's, and that's where my mother, of course, bought all of her clothes and bought our clothes. But my sister's life was a little different than mine, too, being 11 years older. She knew the Depression, which I did not. It was still going on when I was a child, but I was too young to understand. By the time I knew things about the economy, we were getting ready for World War II, and things were pretty good. Unfortunately, that's the good side of a war, is that there are jobs for people. And so, and we didn't have any boys, so we didn't suffer as people did whose sons had to go and fight the war. But I wish to the day that she died, my mother kept every piece of string. She'd roll it into a great big ball, even short pieces. Sometimes you'd go to wrap a gift, or not a gift, you don't wrap gifts with string, but a package. And you'd think you were going to have a big piece of string, and you had 6 inches of string. So when they talk about people saving string, I know exactly what they're talking about. You didn't eat in restaurants. There certainly was no fast food. And in fact, the only time I can remember my dad eating out, not coming home for lunch, was if Mother and I would go shopping. We had to go to Modesto because we went to Modesto for Easter dresses and for school dresses, and see, it was Easter and Christmas. Oh, and the Festa. I always got a new dress, and Mother got a new dress, and my sister got a new dress for the Festa. I notice in the schools that there has been so much change from the time that I was in school to our schools now, with the multiplicity of ethnic groups and incorporating ethnic elements in our schools and having them appreciate each other. It's a beautiful thing for me to see, because when I was a child, this was not so. We attempted to hide the fact that we were children of immigrants, and we were embarrassed when our parents couldn't speak English. My dad spoke very good English because he was in business, and I think that, he learned that way. My mother's English, she spoke, went to the bank, everything that she needed to do, but she did not speak what we would call proper English. And that was embarrassing to me and my friends who were in the same position. And that's one thing I do praise the schools for, how much that situation has improved. But it was only a few years ago that a girl from my first grade and I were talking about this, and her parents were Swedish, and mine, of course, Portuguese. And I started laughing, and I said, Carmen, I would have died in elementary school if you had known that I spoke Portuguese. Well, she started laughing, and she laughed and laughed until the tears were rolling down her face, and she said, and you never knew that I spoke Swedish. And I didn't, and we were best friends. But it was just a different time, a different era, and we were supposed to be Americans. But it was true. My sister and I used to talk about that, and of course she was born in 1914, so she was really a child of the 20s. And if anything, it was worse for her. And one thing that we don't like to mention, but there were no Portuguese teachers. I mean, teachers of Portuguese descent. They didn't go to college. They didn't become teachers. And had they become teachers, they wouldn't be hired. So there was, now we call it discrimination. I don't know what they called it at that time. And I had a family friend. He was he was my sister's age, And he was a graduate of the University of California, which is a prestigious school. And he wanted to teach at the high school here. And he had a faculty friend, and the faculty friend had become principal, and he point blank told him, he said, he said, I want to hire you, but the board will never hire a Portuguese or a Catholic. But that was in the early 30s. I graduated from the university in the late 40s, and I was offered an administrative position at that same high school. So we had come a long ways in actually less than 20 years, from not being able to hire a teacher to actually hiring an administrator. So times, very fortunately, have changed. But I was still in the area, really, and I know people really don't always like to hear this, but Portuguese girls did not go to college. If you finished high school, that was great, and if you got a job as a teller at the bank, you had really, for a Portuguese girl, you had really arrived. And my sister, we were very fortunate, and we don't know why or what the difference was, but our parents were very interested in our getting an education. And so my sister she finished 2 years of junior college, and she would have gone on, except she got married the day after graduating from junior college, so that took care of that. And I went on to junior college, and then I went to Stanford and graduated there and got a teaching credential and went into teaching and later administration. So in that period of time, it became very different. And now I see the children of immigrants and even immigrants themselves going on to college, going to the university, some of them getting doctorate degrees, and it's just a beautiful evolution of thinking that I have witnessed during my lifetime. When I went to Modesto Junior College, as far as I know, I was only the third Portuguese person who had been on the staff. The head of the agriculture department, Ruben Silva, had been there for a number of years, and there was also a woman on the staff who had been there several years before I came, but she had denied being Portuguese. She never let anyone know, but I think that at the time that she was hired, had she been Portuguese, that she might not have been hired. Plus being a woman, and I know myself that I was the first woman hired in the mathematics department. Prior to that time, it was a man's world. So I was in this interesting situation of watching both the ethnic development and the women's movement. So they were interesting years. Then when I came to Modesto Junior College, the women in town, several women in town, had organized an international students club. Most of these women had gotten into this work because they had students living in their homes, and they felt that the students needed to socialize with each other from different countries, and then it gave them a chance also to teach the students American ways. So they asked me if I would also be a campus advisor for the group. And so I became involved with the International Students Club. And we had students from many different countries. Modesto Junior College really went all out to get students to come. And particularly in agriculture, we're known internationally. So I had students from the Azores. When I first went to JC, which was 1959, it was mostly men students, but in the 27 years that I was there, we were getting a lot of women, both women immigrants and foreign students coming in. We had several Brazilians as well as students from the Azores. So it was a real eye opener to me. And interestingly enough, most of the male students were interested in engineering. So they were also part of our math department. And then I actually didn't teach math there very long. I was there 27 years, but I went into administration. And then I became, let's see, I was in counseling and I was chairman of counseling. I became dean of instruction, and I was the first woman to be hired there. So I was the first woman dean of instruction and the first Portuguese woman dean of instruction. Well, probably the first Portuguese dean of instruction. So but they were interesting times. But I retired in 1985, and now it's a life of travel, including going back to visit the Azores again.
My name is Luis Machado, and I was born in Patterson, California, and now I live in Turlock, California.
My name is Antoinette Vieira, and I was born in Turlock, California. Now I live in Oregon.
My name is Paulo Pimentel. I was born in San Diego, California, and now I live in Turlock, California.
My parents are both from São Jorge, Açores, and they always tell me stories about how things were hard in the old country, how much they worked for the little that they received. My father came to this country at the age of 27. He started working here, and he soon realized that this is where he wanted to spend his life, or at least get a little something so that he could have something if he were ever to go back. So he returned, and he married at the age of 29 to my mother. They came back to California. They were working in Modesto, California for about eight years, where my dad was milking cows. In the old country, his experience was with agriculture and with cattle, and so he continued that type of work when he got to this country. When he arrived here, his desire was to have his own business, his own dairy business. So both of my parents worked very hard to that end, and they achieved it in about 10 years after they arrived in this country. They started their own dairy farm in Turlock, California, and that's where I was born. And, well, that's where I was raised. I was born in Patterson, California. My parents have always said that life was hard in the old country, and so that they wanted to come to this country. So this is where the opportunity was to have things a little bit better than they had in the Azores. My family has always spoken Portuguese in the home. My father, since coming to this country, he worked mainly by himself on the dairy farm, and so English wasn't really a priority for him. It wasn't something that he had to learn out of necessity. He was very comfortable with his lifestyle, with our lifestyle, just continuing to speak Portuguese in the home. And so my parents, my mother and father, have always spoken Portuguese in the home. My oldest sister also learned Portuguese, and I have also a younger brother. We all speak Portuguese in the home when we're speaking with my parents. My sister also ended up getting more education in Portuguese. She took university level courses in Portuguese and also went to São Miguel and to Coimbra to study, and she teaches Portuguese classes here in Turlock, California. I have also taken I've had some schooling in Portuguese, including the Portuguese school George de Sena in Turlock, and I've probably had maybe 4 or 5 years of weekly classes in Portuguese at the Portuguese Cultural Center. I also took a university level Portuguese course at Dartmouth, in the University of Dartmouth in Massachusetts, and it's where I got some Portuguese literature and Portuguese grammar, which is something that I find very valuable. Since I have this experience with Portuguese, I feel like that's increased my interest in other languages. I also speak Spanish, and I've always been interested in languages, and I think it's a result of having this experience with Portuguese, of having a second language. Something else that I enjoy about speaking Portuguese is that you can be anywhere in the country or anywhere in the world, and you're always looking for somebody else who speaks Portuguese. It's something that unites you and all of these other people who share this language. My friends here in Turlock, many of them speak Portuguese, and it's amazing the things that we can share. With my American friends, it's really hard to share certain ideas just because of my culture and just because of being Portuguese. I can't share certain things with them that I can with my Portuguese friends. Even if we're speaking just English, you can convey Portuguese ideas in English that an American person won't understand, and it's just a bond that we have that I don't think can exist without knowing a second language. So, like if there's something that we say, an expression that we use in Portuguese, I was saying goodbye to him, but instead of saying goodbye in English, I said chaleira, which is a teapot, which is the word for teapot in Portuguese. But it sounds like see you later in English. So I was able to use that expression, which is funny to us because we understand Portuguese, but makes no sense in English unless you only take it as see you later. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that we share that I can't share with one of my American friends, and we use so many of those that they can't even come to mind right now because they're just almost part of normal vocabulary. So that's one example.
Well, my parents, either fortunately or unfortunately, never really needed to learn English. They were always around Portuguese people, family, fellow workers, so it was always important for us to speak Portuguese. At first, just for communication-wise, just to be able to speak to our parents. And once my 3 brothers and I grew up a little more, it became a connection to our past and to our parents. For me, it became a very big importance, a very big value. And I think it has a lot to do with the passing of my father, that this became a connection that I didn't have him to tell me the story. So I took it upon myself to learn about his past and my mom's past. So I took courses, many years, probably more than I want to know, at Escola Jorge de Sena in Turlock, where I learned more about the writing, grammar, reading, and I can remember my mom dictating to me. She would read a passage and I would have to write it, and then she would correct it for the accents and all the fun stuff. And so once I got a taste of that, and I went to university at Cal State Stanislaus, I took it upon myself to take more classes, to learn more about the cultural aspects, the art, the literature that my parents didn't have the opportunity to share with me simply because they didn't have an education. My mom went to the 2nd grade, basically, and my father was fortunate enough to go to 4th grade. And I actually have some of his old books on my shelf to remind me, education, education. So once I got a taste for the culture and the art and the literature, it became important for me to involve myself in those types of aspects in the community that I'm in, as far as I can never say the word, dance groups, folklore groups, singing. I don't sing very well, but I love to sing. So a lot of the old Portuguese traditional stuff. Just being a part of the weekly Portuguese Mass, having Portuguese friends, people that can know the connection and understand kind of the split almost between American and the Portuguese that we share and are fortunate to have.
In the middle of May, I had the opportunity to go to Portugal, to Lisbon, Portugal, for the third World Encounter of Portuguese youth and Luso descendants. I had never been to Portugal before. It was actually my first trip on an airplane, and it was an incredible experience. There was approximately around 85 youth ranging from the ages of 18 to 30 from 20 countries and 5 continents. Such countries as Japan, Spain, Panama, Venezuela, and just all sorts of places, Canada, Brazil. And it was an incredible experience to be united with so many youth, Portuguese youth, who spoke Portuguese. And it was also amazing for me to see that there were so many Portuguese people outside of Portugal. I had always known here in the United States there's a lot of Portuguese people on the West Coast, and there's a lot of Portuguese people in the East Coast, nothing in the middle. And to see people from speaking Portuguese from France and Germany and South Africa, and it was just amazing for me. The main objective of this encounter was for us to discuss and to inform ourselves of certain programs that Portugal has for youth, and how they, as a country, can go outside of their borders to promote the Portuguese culture, especially focusing on the youth. And we had many visits. We had visits with the Prime Minister, with the President of the Republic, with many famous dignitaries. And it was really unique and amazing to see all of us together there. And the one thing that we all had in common was that we spoke Portuguese. Obviously some Portuguese was worse than others, but it was still that there was always that idea of that goal to one day speak perfect Portuguese, one day, to be completely and fully Portuguese. But at the same time, we did feel Portuguese. We did feel a part of the country. And it was that united us all together, and whether or not we were from all parts of the world, really.
I talked a little bit earlier about taking courses about learning the history and art of Portugal. And growing up, and even some people that I know nowadays, being Portuguese or the Portuguese culture, experience, what have you, is the sweetbread, it's the bolo de leite, the cow parade, it's the festa queens. And there's so much more to that I didn't even realize until I took it upon myself to take classes and to really learn such rich history that Portugal has, the art, the literature, the music. It's amazing. And not only their history, but the movements that Portugal as a nation is trying to make and to integrate into Europe. And so it's really sad for me to know young Portuguese people, even my brother a little bit, I'm sure he's happy I'm telling this to you, is a little bit afraid or embarrassed to say he's Portuguese, because there's this attitude, there's this belief that Portuguese is nothing to be proud of, is nothing to really share or to express that part of us. So I would really like to see more in the universities, like Jorge Sena, maybe even cultural centers, to really express the history, the art, the literature, the culture, and the movements that Portugal is making to improve itself, so that young people and adults and everyone can really share and be proud of the rich history that we have.
My father's experience in the Azores was one where subsistence farming was the lifestyle. He's worked in agriculture his entire life with cattle. To this day, my father works with cattle in Saint George. Since he was a boy, he always worked in the fields. He and my grandfather would go out in the fields, and if it was all their work that they did had to do with working with animals. And so from a very early age, my father learned to work with animals, and that was part of their lifestyle because they didn't have a tractor. There was no electricity, for that matter, running water or a television, anything like that. And so they had to do with a minimum of resources in that respect. I feel like I've had a very unique experience in that I've seen two totally different lifestyles, two totally different cultures. One where the technology is like medieval technology as far as agriculture, and one where agriculture is using state-of-the-art equipment, and it's been amazing to see the huge contrast between these two things. And I think not being Portuguese and not having immigrant parents that came from a place like the Azores, like São Jorge, and coming to a place like Turlock, California, which is also very agricultural, I don't think I would have been able to have that type of experience. Being that my father's always worked with cattle, he's also always had an interest in maintaining that tradition. And in this country, when he started his dairy business, at first he didn't have a tractor. So he had to get the work done. He trained a team of cows, and he strapped on the yoke, and they pulled his wagons so that he could feed the cows. And this was something they did for a long period of time until he could afford a tractor. And it was something that was second nature to him. And he, throughout his entire life, he's always adapted. He's always been able to do things despite not having everything he's needed. And that's affected me in a huge way. His confidence, I think, has given me confidence in almost anything that I do, which I think is a great thing. And it's also given me experience with animals, as far as training these animals to do work, which is, I think, an experience that very few people have. None of my friends, have the experience that I've had with being able to plow a field behind a pair of bulls or of cows, and it's just something that has helped me to really get very deep into a part of my culture that would have been impossible had my father not brought this from the Azores. Something that I feel like I need to do is take my father's experience and his knowledge about this particular aspect of Portuguese culture and maybe write it in a book, because, for example, the ox carts that we use, I mean, even from island to island, there's a difference between the ox carts, and just every single component on the ox cart has a name. And I feel like all of that knowledge will be lost if somebody doesn't put it down in a book. I think we've all been friends for a very long time as a result of our parents and our families all attending Mass and going to church at Our Lady of the Assumption in Turlock, California. It's been a place where the Portuguese families have gotten together, and I think, yeah. That's it.
Well, like Luis is saying, and kind of go off the subject, I call him Luis, and it's funny if we're in a group of friends where if there's one or two people who don't speak Portuguese, and I refer to him as Luis, just like, who is that? Because they would know him by Luis. And it's always been just little things like that that's brought us closer together as a group of friends, as a group of young adults, growing up in the same community, going to church together, doing various retreats together, and dancing together. And it's always been this that's united us. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that our closest friends are probably those who are involved in the church, and who have been involved in the church in the past, in our community. And it's wonderful to say that, I know Luigi's family, I know Antoinette's family. And without having grown up together, we really wouldn't be a close group of friends. And it's not just us three. It's dozens of us that can get together in a room and say, yeah, you remember that one time we were all together and your mom said that, and everybody started laughing. And it's just little things like that that brings us all together, and that uniqueness of being Portuguese. And there's so many of us around here that it's pretty fun.
I feel fortunate and blessed to be in a community and to see not only Paul and Luis, but other people our age basically on a weekly basis. And I feel very fortunate and comfortable. I know that if I need help with the retreat or with music, I can ask Luis. If I need help from Paul, I know that I can come to them and not feel like it's a burden. Feel like it's a group effort to fulfill the commitment. So I feel very lucky.
I studied engineering, and I'm working now for the city of Turlock. I work in the information technology department, and where we maintain the computers and the networks. I believe that my knowing how to speak Portuguese has allowed me to interact with other people who are in the same field. And it also helps me to help other people who speak Portuguese and have issues relating with computers or need advice. I believe that speaking Portuguese and knowing a second language is always helpful to anybody in any profession that needs to communicate anything. I mean, whether it be your interests, whether it be for help, advice, and I think it's an invaluable asset to have.
I just finished my first year of teaching, and I teach first grade. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to be a teacher, so it's really been a good end and a nice beginning for me. Once I decided to begin my course, my study as a teacher, I found it really nice that there were other educators that I could turn to for advice, questions, just any types of help that I might need in going the right direction with my studies. Excuse me. And as a teacher, as a person, I guess, visible now in the community, even in just a year, I've been able to help people who come to the offices or even just out on the streets that don't know the language. Maybe they just arrived, or maybe like my parents didn't have the opportunity or the necessity to learn the language. And so I'm very thankful that I'm able to help these people, even if just a simple translation. And it's almost like a sense of giving back, because I know that a lot of people helped my parents and us out in the beginning, and so to be able to return it is a wonderful thing for me. And if it's through the Portuguese language, well, even better.
I just graduated from the university here in Turlock, California. I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. When I was smaller, I wanted to be an attorney, and always thinking that I was going to help the Portuguese public, since I did know how to speak Portuguese. And although that's not in my near future right now to be an attorney, I tell you honestly, I do not know what I want to do when I grow up. But I do know that I want to continue using my Portuguese in whatever job or whatever career that I get. I currently have a job where I don't need Portuguese. I really don't. It's not a job that I need to have an education. So at the same time, I want to use the degree that I received and use the Portuguese, which I think it's also has been a school in itself, a school at home. Learning Portuguese, that I feel like I still haven't graduated. I still need many, many years to graduate from the School of Portuguese at home. But I want to be able to use the Portuguese that I have learned to help others to translate, which I love doing. I feel proud in being able to help somebody who can't speak English, who needs the help. So I feel that's what I want to do, and if at all possible, I want to stay here in Turlock, California, in the community that I've grown up, continue to grow within the community that really hasn't that has treated me so well, and I feel that it would only be right, only be fair if I gave back to that same community that has helped me become the person that I am today.